All right, so our goal today is to get a local dev set up for making changes to the SeedSigner code, getting those changes running on a SeedSigner device, and then committing those changes back to GitHub, and then potentially creating a pull request back into the main SeedSigner repo to be included in a future actual project release. So,
and can we add to that or will we cover in that the step through of the running, a code edit in the dev environment? So, because over the last couple of days, I made a couple of test edits in the code from the downloaded version, but of course I had to then launch and rerun and do those changes.
Yeah, we'll do some live code changes and see how those can be run and rerun and debugged a little bit. But so the first step, if you haven't already, and I need to hide my face for a moment, there we go, is from the main SeedSigner repo, which is, it's linked from seedsigner.com. It's just github.com/seedsigner. You need to create an account in GitHub. So I'm logged in as me. And then you want to fork the project, which means you're going to take the entire project and make a copy of it within your account that's fully under your control, because of course, nobody else has edit and commit permissions within the main SeedSigner repo, but we need a place to commit our changes. So like if we look at the URL, SeedSigner is the account that's that we're looking at, and then lowercase SeedSigner is the name of the repo. But since I've already forked this, I can go to kdmukai/SeedSigner. And so this is my fork of the SeedSigner repo where I do all of my development work. I commit to my fork, and then I create pull requests from my fork back to the main repo to get my changes in. So once you have your fork, now we need a copy of your fork onto your local machine. So you can just hit this code button and copy this HTTPS URL. And it's literally just the URL we're looking at plus .git at the end. So I'm going to copy that. And then on your local machine, let's see. Let me open a new terminal. So on your local machine, you would just say git clone and then that URL. And if I were to hit enter, it'll grab a copy of my entire repo and download it. I've already done that, so I don't want to do it now. And then I'm within VSCode here. And so this is how I'm going to view my code that we just downloaded from our custom fork. So at this point in time, we have an identical copy of the SeedSigner code sitting on our local machine. It's been opened in VSCode. And if we wanted to, we could, break things in the code, right?
Yeah.
But it's just running on it's just a copy of the code running on our local system. And then for convenience, so actually, first of all, VS Code has Git integrated within it. So if I do make a change, let's say, just, something totally innocuous. Okay. So now I've made a change. Because VS Code is integrated with Git, it picks up changes that I would need to commit back to my repo if I wanted to keep them as part of my copy of the project. And so it'll just show you interactively hear what's changed. Green is in addition, and then if I go back and if I remove something, or say comment something out, then red is something that's been removed.
Okay. Now, if I recall, because I've used the web environment of VS Code, it is temporarily saving the changes in case you lose power or whatever. But the commit is actually okay. Now commit. Here's a description. Here's an offer of add a description as to what your changes are.
Yeah, the web VS Code is integrated in the GitHub website, and it's a little surprising. Like if you're just viewing your fork and you hit period, it's like a hidden amazing feature. It just spins up a web-based version of VS Code where you can navigate through your fork of the code, and then even start making edits, like you said. And I guess the edits, when they're not yet committed, I'm guessing the edits are stored in like your local browser memory, like in a giant cookie or something.
Something like that. So I have definitely seen that.
Okay, and so I wouldn't. Go ahead.
And just when you move to another window, or you're going to change something, it'll say to you, do you want to save it? But it's different to a commit.
Yeah, right. So this is just some interesting magic they're doing to create some form of storage to store your changes. But as far as your GitHub repository is concerned, those changes have not been made. They haven't been locked in until you've actually made a commit. And so this is when you're actually like, submitting code into your repository to be stored. And actually, so even though VS Code has this Git integration built in, it is useful. I do refer to it from time to time. You can also fully interact with Git from the command line. So I can go Git status. Oh, I gotta get into my directory. Let's see. Git status. And so it's showing me that I have one modified file. It's the controller.py. And so there's messaging here like, okay, I could do a Git commit for this change. If you're a command line jockey, you can learn all the commands to control Git completely from the command line. But I like the point and click UI of the integration here in VS Code. And then even more so, I use the Github Desktop app, which is just totally optional. It's just doing the same thing that the command line can do. It's just nicer. You get a visual, green-red diff, just like in VS Code, and it's just easier to say like, I made some important change, and then I can commit my change all straight from this UI. So it just makes life simpler. Oh, I can make the text bigger. That's a little bit easier to see. So I actually do most of my interaction with Git in this GitHub Desktop UI, just because it's just so much easier. And then some things, I mean, we don't really have time to go into a full Git tutorial, but you can manage your different branches. And over time, if the SeedSigner repo has a lot of changes, you'll need to go back and basically merge the changes from the upstream, which is where you forked from, so the main SeedSigner repo, and merge those back into yours so that your fork is up to date with the latest changes in the real SeedSigner repo. But anyway,
so
yeah.
Changes have occurred. That's if changes have occurred, have been published, have been committed into the SeedSigner main repo, and I need to sync up my changes.
Right. Right.
Not my changes, sorry. The other changes are coming down to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now, one thing that we know, so now we've got a copy of the code and we can edit it on our local machine, save it locally, and then when we're ready, we can commit it up to our repo. But the more interesting thing is actually being able to run our code changes. And so for that, before we got started, Marc was having some challenges figuring out how to get this set up in his Windows/WSL/Ubuntu environment, which is just kind of hell. And so we're not going to subject you all to sitting through us trying to debug Marc's setup, but let me just show you how things are set up on my end. And then after we wrap this up, I'll help Marc get his system totally configured. But in VS Code, we can do a command P and we can say install, oops, is it command P? I forget the commands now. Hang on. Let me just use the menus. Let's see, code, preferences, settings, configure. How do I add plugins? Always forgetting how to do this. I thought it was command P. That's just giving me, no, that's not what I want. Command Shift P. Oh, there we go. Command Shift P. Install. And then we can go to install extensions. Sorry about that. I'm rusty on some of this stuff. So there's a whole bunch of extensions we can add into VS Code to make it a little more enhanced. Like there's some Python things we can install, just do like syntax highlighting and whatever. But what we're really looking for is rsync. So I'm running sync-rsync. And what sync-rsync does is it's really just a very light wrapper for the rsync command that you can have installed in your Linux environment. So let's see if we can make this bigger. All right, so I just ran rsync on my terminal and there we go. So I ran rsync and it's just dumping out all the options and how to use it from the command line. So if I were to read through all of this, I could figure out the command that would rsync from my local code. So I'm in my KDMukai directory on my Mac. I put everything under a dev folder, and then I'm in SeedSigner. So there's some command that will push everything from my target directory or source directory to my destination. And my destination is the same terminology I would use to SSH into. So SSH pi at Raspberry Pi.local. I think I called this one Raspberry Pi. I might have renamed it SeedSigner. Yeah, I did rename it. All right, so this one is SeedSigner. Okay, yeah, so I'm
Right,
in.
and obviously that's because you've got multiple devices all configured. As we saw in the video last week, with the 7 CPUs that are on your desk.
Yeah, so it's actually my life is terrible because my SSH gets really confused by all these multiple devices that get plugged into my machine that are all called Raspberry Pi.local or they're all called SeedSigner.local. And I'm not good enough with SSH and understanding what's going on. But so what I've started to do for my main dev SeedSigner, which is plugged in now, I gave it a static IP. So the real way that I SSH in, let me get out of here, is to say pi at 192.168.2.1. Oh, refused. Interesting. What? Well.
Next confused.
Oh no! Wait! I think I understand. Yeah. Okay. So I read it wrong. The readout that I was looking at. So this was my previous successful SSH session, right? It was telling me my last login was from 2.1, but the
oh yeah, correct.
so that's how my Mac identifies it in this kind of tight USB network. But the Pi, my dev Pi, is actually 2.200.
Oh, 200.
That's the static IP I set for it. So keeping in mind that this is the command that I use to access the Pi, and then if we look at where I am within my Pi device, I'm in home/pi/SeedSigner. And so if I back out of source here, you can see like it's the full SeedSigner repo copied onto my Raspberry Pi. So keeping this in mind, if I look at my VS Code preferences settings and I type the rsync settings, and I want my rsync settings to only apply to this particular workspace because I have different projects that I want to sync to different devices, let's say. Within this particular workspace, I can scroll through my rsync settings. And first of all, what is the rsync executable that runs on my system? It's just called rsync. So let me get out of the Pi again. And so that's why from my command line on my Mac, I can just call rsync and it responds, right? So all I have to do here is say, yeah, the executable is called rsync. On some other system, I might have to do like, it's located in blah, bin, local, foo, right?
The full path to it.
Right, right. But in my case, it's just directly accessible.
Now, can I just pause you for a second of clarification there? You've got the Raspberry Pi, the SD card in the Raspberry Pi. It's got the SeedSigner repo on it.
Yeah.
And you've got the SeedSigner repo on your local Mac as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you're editing, which one are you actually changing and then rsyncing back out of?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my VS Code is always editing my local copy on my MacBook. That's where I want my changes to happen. That's where I manage my interactions with my GitHub repo. And then rsync within VS Code is going to push any changes from my MacBook into the SeedSigner device.
Oh, I see. I thought, right. Okay, now I understand. I thought that rsync was pushing it back up to github.com, not, that's where I thought it was going. Okay.
Yeah, and it'll be more clear as we scroll through these settings a little bit more.
Yep. Okay. It's nice to have an understanding of the environment. That's great.
So I'm just turning on notifications. Show me notifications for when you're syncing. Sync the project on save. So anytime I save something locally, sync it. Or the entire project. Sync individual files. And then here we go. So what is my remote location that I want to write to? So my remote location is that SSH credential Pi at either seedsigner.local, Pi at raspberrypi.local, or in my case, Pi at my Raspberry Pi's static IP address that I gave it. So that should match however you SSH into your device. Colon, so this is saying we're going to write to this device over this like SSH credential, colon, to this directory on that device. And so if I go back into my Pi down here, I'm going to SSH in using the exact same command that's copied up here, or the exact same, I don't know, location, credential, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And then if I pwd again, /home/pi/SeedSigner, and I can see my full copy of the repo, of the SeedSigner repo. That's because I said, hey, copy this this project that I have open in VS Code, copy it to /home/pi/SeedSigner. So it's going to write anything from that, any change that I make in this entire repo structure that I just cloned from GitHub is going to be copied down here. So let's just do a very simple example. Let's create a new file, call it hello.whatever, and I'm going to say, hi. I'm going to hit save. Now I get this pop-up notification down here that says sync completed, and I see rsync has a checkmark status. And so now, okay, you can go away. So now if I do an ls down here, I now have my hello.md got copied to my Raspberry Pi Zero.
Got it. Right.
All right.
And
then
for some reason, Keith, the SeedSigner itself, the camera has popped up. It's sitting over the code partly. The orange guy, maybe I never actually noticed it before. Your camera that's pointed at the SeedSigner screen.
yeah.
Oh, were you including that?
Sorry, Sid, I couldn't make that out.
It's the camera that's pointing at the SeedSigner itself, and its screen is hiding some of that code.
Oh, got it. Okay. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you. But yeah, so this is just to show I'm on my Raspberry Pi device right now. I'm on the Pi Zero, and I just did this ls to list all the files, and my new file has appeared. One minor oddity, if I delete the file, so now I'm back on my MacBook here, and if I delete the file on my MacBook, get rid of that. I think there's a setting in rsync to sync deletes, but I don't have that activated. And here's what you're probably going to need to use the WSL.
That's probably what I'm going to need. Yep. Interesting.
So I think there's an option to push deletes down to the device also, but I've disabled that just for reasons.
Yeah.
Like like all I care about is that my new stuff arrives down on the Pi Zero. I don't care if the Pi Zero collects old crap, like this libsecp binary doesn't belong here. It just, I moved it there at one point myself on the Pi, and it just keeps sitting there, even though it's not something that was synced from the repo.
Got it.
So yeah, I just have a bunch of I tend to just have a bunch of junk sitting around on the device itself. Like, yeah, the reason that libsec binary was there is because I was doing some manual tests using it and other tests. And again, neither of these files are in my repo. I just manually moved them to the Pi to test with. So anyway, that's how we're going to make changes. So let's do an actual change and see it actually do something. So in the source code, SeedSigner GUI components, we have all these GUI constants definitions. And accent color is the most interesting one. I'm going to change that from orange to blue, save it. I get my little pop-up, sync has been completed. And then on the Pi, I have this convenient script called run.sh. So run.sh is just something I made myself, where all it does is it finds the Python executable from within our virtualenv, and then we call main.py to start the SeedSigner app. And so so this way I just don't have to remember any commands. I can just immediately just call run.sh. And then let me bring back the webcam. So when this starts up, Why is my webcam static? What is going on? This is weird. The webcam is not reflecting reality. It's like frozen. Yeah.
That's frozen, or the cam?
The camera is frozen. I'm seeing changes on the Pi, but it's not showing up on the camera. Let me try unplugging it for a sec. And we're gonna have to restart our Zoom session in a moment.
What has disappeared?
No, there we go. Okay.
Is back.
There we go. And we got 2 minutes on our Zoom session. So now the accent color is blue.
Wow. It's rather nice, especially for colorblind people like me.
Oh, interesting. Hey, don't dox personal details.
It's hard to know when I'm seeing the wrong colors, though.
Yeah. Come on, focus. What? Why are we not focusing? But yeah, anyway, so that's and then I can go back to my my code here, and I can change it back to orange. I save. rsync automatically writes my change. I kill my I'm going to kill my SeedSigner, and then I'm going to restart it, and it should restart with orange, and we have orange text and orange buttons. So there we go. We've made changes and pushed them to the device. I'm going to end our Zoom session and restart it so you can jump back in. I'll keep the live stream running.
Thank you. Yeah, just love to see that restart script again.
Yes, we'll do that on the other side of this this restart.
I'll join in. Yep.
Okay, just waiting for Marc to get back in. All right.
Okay.
You are back.
I had the wrong password there, so sorry for the delay.
All good. All right, so you wanted to look at how I'm running my SeedSigner. So first of all, let me maximize all this. So I'm in my SeedSigner. I'm SSH into my device. If we look at my Linux user profile, we made some tweaks to this in the manual installation steps. But so what I also do is so as soon as I SSH in, I change directories to SeedSigner/source, because that's where I'm always operating. I always do an ls just to dump out to see what's in there. It helps me orient myself. And then we had this previous a version of this ps-aux grep call to identify the process that gets auto-started by systemd when the Pi boots up. So it auto-starts the SeedSigner code. And so for me in local dev, I always want to take control of, I basically want to stop the auto-running process. And so this is just bash magic that I don't understand that says, hey, find the process ID for the main.py that's running, and then kill that process number. So as soon as I sign in, it kills the running SeedSigner process and just leaves it blank. And that's all I'm doing for now. And then, as we had mentioned in the manual setup steps, I have my systemd set up so that auto restart is no, because when I kill the SeedSigner process, I don't want it to be automatically restarted. So when I sign in, the SeedSigner process is killed, and I'm automatically changing directory into SeedSigner source. And then I've created this run.sh script, which we can look at. And so notice that in these steps in my .profile, I've changed directory and I've killed the previous process, but I haven't activated my virtualenv. So in this case, my virtualenv lives in .envs, and the specific one is called SeedSigner-env. But if you remember, when a virtualenv is active, it shows up as an additional parentheses on your command prompt identifier here.
Yes.
And so I'm not running my virtualenv right now, but this run.sh script will execute Python from within my virtualenv. And so basically it's a way for me to run within my virtualenv without having to activate it. And the only reason for that is if I do activate it, you wait, and you wait. Okay, so it's like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, right? But like,
that adds up.
Yeah, and like just SSHing into the Pi takes a couple seconds, and it was frustrating me. And so I just wanted to like cut out as much, as much of that time as I could. And so, so that's just my way to, even deactivating takes a while. So this run.sh script, it means that I just don't have to call this. I don't have to activate my virtualenv. That's all. So just me being lazy, trying to shave off a couple seconds.
Well, if you're doing it a few hundred times, might as well write a quick script that will do that.
Yeah. And now also, so we saw that we can change something on our local machine and have that synced down to the Pi. While we're here, let's do something a tiny bit more interesting. I forgot we still had this hello. So I'm not gonna. Maybe next weekend we'll finally talk through the code structure of how the SeedSigner code is organized, the principles behind it. Because until we walk through how this is all organized, it's a little hard to jump in and make changes. You kind of need the lay of the land to know like where things are, why they are the way they are, what is a view, what is a model, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll gloss over all of that for now. But let's say we're doing something really important and trying to dig deeper into what's going on in our system. I have all these print statements, and in the previous last weekend I said we probably shouldn't have any print statements in release, production release, but we do. But in the production releases, all these prints get piped to dev null, so they just get they just go disappear into the ether. But I don't know, let's say there's some important bit of information we want to have in the middle of here. So I'm just going to add that. I save, it's been synced. I can run my script. And so now I'll bring back my camera. So now as it runs, we can kind of monitor the So there's Keith's debugging. And then when I change pages, go to tools, load to the next page. There's Keith's debugging. So you get an idea of how you can start to, you can run a full debugging environment. It's one of my weaknesses as a Python guy. I never run debuggers. I just do tons of print statements on everything. And so like for our GUI components, let's find something interesting here. I'm just scrolling through all this. All right, let me make this easier. Collapse. There we go. A button, sure. Let's see something about a button. Buttons have text. So as we initialize a button, if text is not none, print button, I can't type. And then self.text. So I'm going to print the label that should appear on a button when it's instantiated by our code. So I'm going to exit kill my SeedSigner, restart it. And then any page that displays a button with text, we should see, there we go, scan, seeds, tools, settings. Right, there should be a crap ton in settings. There we go. Advanced settings. Boom. So we're just like dumping all this out into the print. So like this is literally how I debug everything. I just print stuff to the console and see what happened. Like if like let's say a button wasn't centering properly, I'll just print out this is text centered, attribute and just do a sanity check. Yeah. There's much better ways to do real debugging in Python. I don't do them because for whatever. All right. So, I mean, that's the beginnings of how to get yourself set up to make changes to the code and see them executed locally. I don't know, any questions at this point?
No, I think that that pretty much covers it because we've got the dev environment on the machine, then we've got the actual one running on a SeedSigner, r-syncing any changes to there. Then we launch the run script that is going to connect, launch that new code, and off we go to the races from there. Now that's all very, very nice.
Yeah, and I should say, this run script is just a convenience. So I could just I could activate, well, and let me do this kind of the more direct way. So let's see what's in there. So I have this set up. My virtual envs are in .envs SeedSigner bin. So let's see what's in there. All right, so here's our activate script. So I could just say, hey, source activate. And now, oh, that was actually very fast. So now if I say, which Python am I running? It's the one from my virtualenv. And can do other sanity checks. 3.7. And so from the SeedSigner source/source directory, and it's just straight from our GitHub repo. There's an src source directory. So from inside there, the only file we care about is main.py. And so with my virtualenv active, I can just say python main.py, and then that's going to start up my SeedSigner process. So doing it this way, when you've got the virtualenv active, is the exact same thing as running my run.sh script. There's just you know, just two different ways to do the exact same thing.
Yeah. Keith, just remind me again, why do we have the SeedSigner env, the SeedSigner environment? Is that because you're running a different Python version to what's normally on a Raspberry Pi?
That is a good question. So let's exit my virtualenv. Which Python is the default? Python not found at all. That's interesting. How about Python 3? Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm back on my MacBook. Sorry. Okay. There we go. Let me get back into the Pi.
Okay, yeah.
Like homebrew, that's a Mac thing. That doesn't make sense. Okay. So which Python? I do not have the virtualenv active right now. User bin Python, that's the one that comes built in, and its version is 2.7.
Okay.
So we do not want to use 2.7. I believe that this version of Raspberry Pi OS does ship with Python 3. And I think that's going to be the same, the 3.7. Yeah. So, let's see, which Python, and inside the virtualenv, Python or Python 3 are the exact same thing. They're just mapped to each other. Python version. So yeah, 3.7.3 within the virtualenv.
Which is mapped to the other?
Yeah, so for convenience, within the virtualenv, there is no difference between Python versus Python 3. Because when I
true.
Yeah, when I created the virtualenv, I explicitly said I want this environment to be for Python 3, and so then it just takes care of the name mapping so that I can't accidentally run the wrong version of Python within it.
Right. And so actually what we're seeing now is that this version of the Raspberry Pi is already actually running 3.7.3 of Python 3.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't previously, and so that's why you've habitually been using this method.
I mean, it's debatable if the production releases need a virtualenv, but at least for local dev, like I could install Python 3.10 on this Raspberry Pi, let's say, and I could just create a separate virtualenv that is running Python 3.10, and then I could test it on the same device, exit that virtualenv, fire up my old 3.7 virtualenv, and run that. So I could keep going back and forth between however many versions of Python that I want for testing purposes. So it's more useful for local dev. And then similarly for the pip dependencies, so pip freeze will display everything that we.
I mean, in this this virtual machine, essentially, that we have in there, we can install change versions, we can revert back, all of those aspects of having multiple VMs. Right.
And then also for the pip dependencies that get installed into the virtualenv, if there was like an update to PyCamera that we wanted to test, we could create a separate virtualenv that has PyCamera, 2.5 or something, and run that code, and then switch virtualenvs back to this one, and and back and forth. It's just it saves you from making a giant mess of your system and configuration. But in a lot of cases, it's probably not necessary for what we're doing.
Understood. But super nice to have essentially a VM manager that is there and part of. And yeah, I mean, I managed to break my SeedSigner environment a few times over the week. And yeah, I just undid those text file changes that I did, but could have done something more significant, and wouldn't want to break the working environment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. And then one other thing, I don't know if it really needs to be pointed out, but let me go back into my controller here. So let's say we just break something entirely. One of our changes is just terrible. So I'm just going to manually put in a hard crash. And so run my script. There we go. Run my script. So the startup splash screen will still run, but as soon as the main home screen tries to render, we're going to hit my hard crash. And so now we've got the normal Python debugging output at the terminal. And so we can, start investigating, okay, where did we crash? What did I do wrong in my code? And again, this is also how I debug everything. I just break things, then I just crawl through, line by line to figure out, what I did wrong. And actually, let's make a change a little bit deeper. And let's say settings. Yeah, so just the main settings view. Let's do intentional crash.
Keith, to pause for a moment there, because either the camera's gone out of focus or my Zoom is totally blurry. What is going on here? I'm not, the Zoom session you're doing a regular screen share, so there's no camera on that. My Zoom looks like it's gone really super low res.
Yeah, you just got bombed out on your bandwidth.
Okay. Pinned you and unpinned you, and now I'm back.
Okay.
Now I can see your screen again. Thanks.
All right. So I just made a different crash elsewhere in the code within the settings menu, just so we can get a little further into a normal run before we hit it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we boot up. All right, so if I go to tools, I'm fine. If I go to seeds, I'm fine. But if I go to settings, oh no, system error. And I wanted to go a little bit deeper because, let me switch over here. We do capture exceptions and print them to the screen. And so a lot of times you don't even have to look at the, let me switch back. So down here is our Python style exception output. I can hide my webcam. But the nice thing about dumping the errors to the screen with an exception handler is most of the times it can tell you the file that it happened and the line number. So I can look at, hey, settings views.py line 16, and then I can go and look and I say, okay, settings views.py line 16. Oh, there's my problem. So it's kind of cool that you can just use the SeedSigner UI itself to help you debug when you've screwed something up.
Fantastic.
Which I take advantage of often. It tells
you exactly which line your code is faulting on, and we can go back there and see.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, sometimes...
Is that something that you pulled up in the if exception occurs, that error handling that you had, you're printing the line number to screen, or does Python do that on its own?
No, that was a custom bit of code that we have in there. Unhandled exception view. So here's our code. So we set up a warning screen, And let's see. Yeah, I can't remember exactly how. Find all references in the the controller calls it. Let's see. Handle exception. So we're crawling through the code here. This is like we're jumping ahead to an advanced topic here. But if when running a screen there was an exception caught, then handle the exception. When we handle the exception, we do some work to parse the actual exception text, because normally it's like, you know, it could be tons and tons of lines of tracebacks. But so I kind of sort of worked out, you know, which line number and what things to look for. And so it's parsing all of this text, and it's coming up with the end result of, hey, wake up. There we go. The file name, the line number, the function name, and then the exception is, in this case, boom. So we figure out what's the line, what's the exception type, what's the message, and then, you know, some more work to like make it a pretty exception, and then we display that to the screen. So it was all custom.
Oh, nicely done.
Yeah, I mean, part of it was, especially with this massive 0.5.0 release that we did in the end of the first quarter of the year, it was such a big code release that if there were going to be, you know, bugs that turned up, like basically we were all worried about lots of bugs, and it turned out they were very few. But we wanted to, like, it's so hard to debug someone else's experience where they're just like, hey, something went wrong. Like, okay, God, you know, what were you doing? What did you see? And they're like, I don't know. It crashed. Okay, when did it crash? You know? But so at least this way, they could basically take a photo of this error screen and send it to us. And we actually have done debugging this way, like through Twitter. Like somebody would just tweet this exception screen. I take one look at it, I'm like, oh shit, I know exactly what happened. I can fix that. You know, so it just saved so many cycles to fix the few bugs that we had.
Yeah, especially because, you know, the line 16 versus the line, I think it said 14, you know, makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. All right. Should we wrap this one up then?
Sounds like a good plan. And while you've been doing that on the side, I have installed Visual VSCode and sync-rsync on the Windows machine.
Okay. And is it working?
I haven't actually gotten to the run it part, but it's got the rsync location for the remote location. And yeah, I guess we'll see. I can have a look maybe after we're done if that actually works, but the extension exists.
Okay, good.
So that's the good news.
Okay. All right, well then, yeah, let's wrap up here. I think what I'd like to do is next weekend, I need to check my calendar, but if we're both available, I'd like to set aside a bigger chunk of time to finally do the whole goal, the original goal of these sessions, was to do what I'd mentioned a couple minutes ago, which is go through our core SeedSigner code and explain all of the from a high level. How is the code structured? How does it work? How do the flows work? just to understand the core architecture of the Python code for SeedSigner to make it easier for somebody else to go in and figure out how to make changes and have a better intuitive sense of where those changes would have to happen and how extensive those changes might have to be for things like, if you're going to add a new feature, that means adding new screens, new messages, new user flows that go from, one screen to the next, new objects, things like that, new data. So we'll go through all of that next weekend. And then you really should be ready for like ninja level code changes on SeedSigner.
Okay. Well, I've got one that I found that I'd like to actually do and submit and see what everybody thinks. But yeah, that would be fantastic. And I think once I've got after we're done here, I'll get my rsync working. I'll do a couple of changes like you did there, and make sure that that's all happening. And I guess I'll then use Github Desktop to synchronize what's on my local machine back up to GitHub so that I can then make a pull request to say this is a change that I want to suggest.
Yeah, and maybe when you're ready for that, maybe we can do that also as a live stream. We can just walk through the commit and the pull request process if you want to, if there's use for that.
Yeah, I think that'll be a great thing to do.
All right.
So, in the pull request, the review of that pull request is done by obviously, I guess, a couple of people. You would have a look at it. SeedSigner, maybe Nick would have a look at it, etc. Have a discussion about that, and then decide, okay, that's correct, not correct, and then pull that in.
Yeah.
But the actual commits into the main branch, is it called main or is it called?
Yeah, it's main.
Main. Those are done by SeedSigner.
And Nick has commit and merge privileges. I'm the only one who doesn't.
Okay, got it.
Of the three of us.
Yep. Oh, fantastic.
All right,
Good.
so
All right. Well, that's a very nice session. It's got me going. I guess I'll have a look to see what I understand as what would it be, a live, an immediate window that I'm interested. I guess can you run, let me go back a step, can you run the actual SeedSigner code on your local machine? What happens if you ran run on your MacBook?
yeah,
There's no hardware connected, all of that stuff.
Yeah, there's certain dependencies that just won't work. So, like if we look at the manual installation instructions, I think we can see it in here. Yeah, so something like wiring Pi is a specific library for interfacing with the Raspberry Pi hardware, like the GPIO pins. And so you can't install that on a non-Raspberry Pi device. So you can't run that on your Windows machine. I can't install this on my Mac, as far as I understand. And if it's not installed, then other Python dependencies that look for it will fail because they won't be able to import it. So there have been people that have written, I've seen experimental emulators running the SeedSigner code on different, like on a laptop, even on a phone, which is pretty amazing. But I don't know how they did it. Yeah.
And they may have had a wrapper around the entire thing that made it think that there was a screen and there were 3 buttons and a joystick and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it seems like magic to me. I don't understand how they did it. I think it's so cool. I just haven't had time to look into it. All right, but anyway, let's wrap up. So, if this is useful to you, throw us some sats. This is a lnurl QR code that you can send to however many sats you want over Lightning to me. And if we get more than just a tiny bit of spare change, I will share what I can with Marc. But I'm not going to really worry about us splitting, 10 sats right now.
Exactly.
And then something we'll talk about.
And this is amazing. You've got to talk about this.
Well, that'll come later. I don't want to drag this on, but if you use PayNyms in Samurai Wallet or Sparrow Wallet, this is my new PayNym, Restless Night 4 capital FB. I will be hanging on to this PayNym for a while, so you can go ahead and link to my PayNym and send me private on-chain donations if you like. And same thing, if we get anything more than some change, I will share it with Marc, who's my co-host here. But yeah, I'm not really expecting donations to come in, but I just feel like it's required. So yeah, just throw us some on-chain sats over PayNym, or I should hide my face. There we go. Or lightning tips over lnurl. So anyway, that is it for this weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me, Marc.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for your time, Keith. That was really great. I'm going to go set up my Windows environment, and I'll make some notes on how to configure that as I go along.
Excellent. All right. I'll see you next week.
Great. All right. Super. Thanks.